hello, read the recipe. In this video, we're going to discuss... Is something burning? Oh, no, 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 no. My sugar cookies, they're burnt to a crisp. Now what am I gonna eat for dinner? Yeah, that could have been avoided. I'm not just talking basics. I'm talking pre-basics. Welcome to Cooking 99. Ah! Using your senses makes a big difference in the kitchen. In this video, I'm going to talk about why and how to use your senses while you cook. I'm going to go over each of the 5 senses that are commonly discussed, and then a couple bonus senses, including thermoception, your ability to sense heat, and lastly, common sense. If you have VSP, you probably already know what I'm going to say. If you practice paying attention to your senses, like listening to what they're telling you, and you have the confidence to respect your own judgment, your senses can become very useful tools. They can help you make sure things come off the heat at the right time, for instance, or that they taste right. Some people will claim that they don't have a great sense of smell or taste, and that might be partly true, but a lot of the time it's more about how much they pay attention to those senses. It also helps to know what to look for and when to look for it. You can improve your senses by practicing paying attention to them. I read a book once called How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci because I'm a nerd. And an important part of that book was teaching the reader how to practice taking measure of their senses. I walked around for weeks after reading it, taking whiffs of the air and trying to label the different scents I was picking up. I also smelled all sorts of things and tried to commit them to memory. I didn't know it at the time, but I was improving my kitchen abilities. You might be thinking, but if I follow a recipe exactly, I shouldn't have to use my senses at all. If the recipe is written well, then it should turn out perfectly. For the most part, you're absolutely right. The tricky part is recipes are flexible. They're meant to take you 95% of the way, and they're counting on your senses for the last 5%. The cook who wrote that recipe wasn't using your pans, or your oven, or your atmospheric conditions, or your garlic. 2 different cloves of garlic have different potencies depending on where they were grown and how long ago they were harvested. Heck, even 2 lemons from the same tree can taste different. And spices slowly lose their flavor as they sit in your cabinet. Now that doesn't mean you have to throw that paprika out. You just have to use your senses to know if you need to add more than the recipe calls for. By the end of this video, you won't know exactly how to employ your senses to perfect your cooking, but you will know something that seasoned cooks are doing that amateur cooks are not. Even with this knowledge, you won't become a master of your senses overnight. The main idea is to start paying attention now so you can build that skill over time. Taste. It's nasty. When it's safe to do so, taste the food that you're cooking often to know if it has enough of each ingredient. Because each ingredient has different potency, the recipe might be a little off compared to how much you need to add to actually be able to taste it. Work your way up to the point where you can taste that ingredient as much as you think you should. It's much easier to add a certain spice than it is to mask it. When you taste the food, think about whether or not you can sense the salt, the acid, fat, or spices the way that you like it. Also, know that some flavors will mellow out as they cook, and some ingredients like salt and sugar and spices need time to dissolve and incorporate themselves into the dish. So for example, if you decide that something needs salt, add a small amount and then stir and give it a minute before you taste it again to see if the levels are right. Smell. Smells are important because of how linked they are with taste. Here are some examples. You can sometimes smell when something is almost done baking. You can smell when spices or herbs are toasted or activated in your pan. You can smell the proper searing of meats. If your fire or pan is too hot, you can smell a slight burning scent. You can smell when your meat or produce is fresh or past its time. Sight. Blink, blink. Plenty of scenarios will use multiple senses, especially when it comes to sight. A lot of the time when you can see something is right or wrong, you can also smell, hear, or touch it to come to the same conclusion. There are lots of examples, but I'm going to stick to the top 20 or so. You can look for browning, steam, the color of meats, rising of dough, shimmering or smoking oil, the reduction or thickness of a sauce, freshness of ingredients. You can use a toothpick to test if brownies or cake is done, You can see the melting of cheeses, the wilting of greens like collards or spinach, mussel shells opening up when they're ready to eat, bubbles popping on top of pancakes when they're ready to flip, scrambled eggs firming up, or egg yolks or egg whites changing color when you're frying them, noodles becoming less rigid when you're boiling them. You can see when there's not enough liquid in your pot. You can see the transparency of onions while they're sauteing, or color change or cloudiness of soup broth. You can see soft peaks or firm peaks when you're whipping cream. I'm getting so hungry. You can see bubbling or aeration or change in volume when whipping. You can see a mixture of ingredients is fully incorporated with one another, or when it needs more mixing. Some ingredients, like broccoli, become a brighter version of its original color while steaming. I think you get the gist. Using your eyes is very important while you're cooking. Hearing. There's no sound for hearing. Hearing is more subtle and often situational. Some examples are, if you're cooking something in oil, you should hear a sizzle as it goes into the pan. If you don't, the pan was too cold and your food will absorb more of that oil than you want it to. You can think of the sizzle as a force field between the inside of your food and the oil. You can hear popcorn popping. You can hear bread crackling when it's done baking. You can hear boiling action in a pot that you're not supposed to open, like rice. By the way, don't open the rice pot too early. Touch. I don't know, so it just seems appropriate for touch. Touch comes in handy a lot too. You can tell the doneness of meat or fish by poking it. You can tell the freshness of ingredients, like the firmness of produce or sliminess of meat. Ugh, I don't care about the bell. I'm doing it. There's a lot in baking actually. You can tell the dryness or moisture content or elasticity or density of a dough or batter by touching it. You can use a fork or a knife to test the doneness of potatoes. Just feel free to touch things while you're cooking as long as your hands are clean and the thing isn't too hot to get a better sense of how it should feel. Thermoception is a hard one to master, but it's cool enough to talk about. Thermoception is feeling heat, and we use it in the kitchen by holding our hand near something, not on it, to tell if it's hot. For example, before putting a product in a saute pan, I'll hold my palm about an inch above the surface. If I can hold my hand there for longer than 5 seconds, say, it's not hot enough. You can also use water droplets to aid your thermoception by splashing a few onto your surface to see if they jump around and steam off right away. The most accurate and versatile tool for thermoception is obviously a thermometer. But you can use a metal fork or a cake tester the same way sometimes. One trick for cooking fish without a thermometer is putting a fork in it or a cake tester, holding it there for a few seconds, taking it out, and holding it against your lip for a few seconds. If it feels hot on your lip, that fish is done. Use common sense to know how to apply the recipe to your situation, your kitchen, your tastes, your guests' needs or distastes. Like if you know your stove is super de-duper hot and a recipe calls for medium-high heat, maybe start off with medium heat. There will be times when you are unsure of exactly what a recipe is asking you to do. Maybe it's underspecific. Use your newfound knowledge and trust your instinct. You can use common sense to know things like the more potent an ingredient, the more accurate you have to be while measuring it. If you don't have one of these senses, it doesn't mean you can't cook. It just means you'll need to pay attention to your other senses a little bit more. Unless you have ESP, in that case. By the way, you might have noticed that a few examples were repeated in more than one sense category. In truth, you'll be using all of these senses in concert. Takeaways. There are 2 main takeaways from this video. 1, try not to be distracted while you cook, so you can pay attention to your senses. By doing so, you can improve your cook timing and flavors, and maybe more importantly, you can avoid making mistakes that might ruin your food. 2, using your senses is all about practicing them. If you ever have a break during your recipe, pay attention to what you feel, smell, see, hear, and lick. And then use your common sense to know if you need to do anything about it. All right, read the recipe. Bye. Give a beer. Thanks for sticking around. I don't need you to subscribe or smash that like button, but I do want to answer any questions you have, so please stick them in the comments section. We'll respond to as many as we can. We also plan on doing a Q&A at some point, so if a question gets brought up enough, we'll also stick the answer in that video. Please comment away.